So a 12-year-old long abandoned theory being true, some face reveals from Sword, pretty girls all across the board, and a Franky arc? Ow, am I dreaming? This is a dream, right? Hello, humans of the world. I'm Dawn of the World. Welcome aboard. So along with a blessed Franky-centric arc, another dream of mine is to reach 20k subs by the end of the year. And we're getting really close, so if you could press that subscribe button and ding that notification bell. Let's jump right into the chapter. First page, we're obviously picking right back up from the shenanigans we left off. I like how Luffy's just kinda got his flailing hold of the other two, but it's just refreshing to see Bonny interacting with the Straw Hats in the New World. And by the same measure, she tries to warn them about the big robotic shark that's emerging. I mean, there's a whole lot that we don't know about Bonny. There's a lot we don't know. She's really quite mysterious. I expect we'll learn a fair bit about her this arc. But what I have noticed about her is that she is in the know and she's pretty snarky on the surface, but there's a lot of things she cares about. Taking off her clothing in front of men isn't one of those things, but there are a lot of things that she does care about. She does try to help people where she can. She's warning the Straw Hats of the shark here. She pushed Zoro out of the Tenryubito's path back in Sabaody. Though that being said, in these occasions, she could be helping others to help herself. She pushed Zoro in Sabaody because she knew that if she didn't, it would trigger the arrival of an admiral, and nobody wants the admirals here. And she could very well be warning the Straw Hats about the shark here because she sees the Straw Hats as the lifeline between herself and drowning. As much as I would love to get into a deeper analysis of Bonny, there's a lot to cover in this chapter. And now we have Jinbe going to the rescue of Luffy, Chopper, and Bonny. One of the several many highlights of this chapter. I've been eagerly awaiting for the moment that Jinbe would need to fish someone, or rather multiple someones, out of the water. And it did not take long. It's so great to finally have a fishman in the crew now, so we have somebody to mitigate the whole hammer situation. Jinbe is clearly the man for the job now. He's official hammer fisher on top of being the helmsman. And little detail here also, I like the way he just seems to be this really soothing and calming presence throughout the ordeal. Like, he assures Luffy and Chopper over here, he lets his three rescuees know what's going on, lets them know if he's about to submerge. He really is a pro at this. It's also been really exciting to see him act as the helmsman. This is something we really saw last chapter as well. Like, having him there really alleviates that pressure from the rest of the crew, and also he's able to bring all of this expertise. He fits like a glove. A big blue fatherly glove. I also really like this trust that he's already building with the crew. This is part of Franky's dream, really, to just stop. Oh shit. This is part of Franky's dream, really, to be able to give the Sunny the best possible helmsman. I also reckon that Franky would love the fact that the helmsman of his ship is a fisherman, seeing as the man who taught Franky everything that he needed to know in order to build the ship was also a fisherman. Franky and Jinbe have the potential for this really interesting dynamic. Also, by and large, Franky has kind of been like a mentor to much of the crew, and now Franky is like a whole 10 years older than him and an old soul to boot. He could even be a good mentor to Franky if needed. Anyway, under the water here, we get a bit of a better view of the shark, and there's a 03 on its fin, the third number. And of course, we also get this giant robot mecha dude. When I first glimpsed this, I thought that this was Franky in a new kind of robot or mecha form. And I'm sure other people did as well, you know, especially if you missed the Vega Force plaque or whatever on the chest. Simply because it looks so much Franky. I mean, there are numerous physical similarities going on here, but it kind of makes sense that they would look alike, seeing as Franky spent 2 years at Karakuri Island in Vegapunk's old lab, and he would have learnt a lot while he was there and implemented it into his own practices. And his current body was probably even inspired by some of the things that he came across while in that lab, hence the resemblance. So this Franky lookalike has the number 12 on their shoulder, similar to the way in which Franky has numbered his battle Frankies over the years, though this is probably just standard practice in the nerd world. It also has the words Vega Force stamped into one side of its chest and a military star stamped into the other side. So I guess now is a good time to be a nerd and look into the name. And the word Vega is a name for the brightest star in the constellation of Lyra and one of the most noticeable stars in the Northern Hemisphere. So it's quite interesting that there's a military star opposite this. And what's even more interesting is that Franky has had stars as part of his design since before the time skip. It's very JoJo like that. So these stars are kind of another thing that connects him to Vegapunk, but I won't go getting too speculative right now. Also, in this panel where everybody's looking on, it's nice to see Zoro is just grabbing Brook by the afro and Sanji is taking care of Robin, but Franky's absence from this panel, even though he's kind of meant to be there, also led me to believe that the robot was him upon a first glance. Now, I will get back to that group, but I'm attempting a more chronological approach to my discussion this week. So on a nearby island, we get to meet a number of Marines at the G14 base, and I don't think that Tashigi or Dol are a part of Sword like the others that we met here, since they don't have it in their little introduction plaques and they're not shown to be with the other members of Sword. So this creates a pretty interesting sort of dynamic, because I imagine that Smoker is somewhere out there on this island as well, and given his and Tashigi's journey of realizing that the Marines aren't always the good guys, an organization such as Sword might be up their alley. We still know very little about the mechanics of Sword, however, as well as whatever their recruitment processes might be. Hopefully we'll find out what their whole deal is in this arc, since they're obviously going to be relevant. And we have a few new characters here, including Dol, as mentioned, and we've only had this one panel of her, two if you include this one from behind, and I can honestly say that I've had no other choice but to simp.
Hard eyes, motherfucker.
Unlike the other Marines that we meet in this chapter, she's a G14 base rather than a Navy HQ base, so as a Marine, this is her home turf. The others are all abroad, I guess. Not only that, but she's a Vice Admiral and the commander of this base, so she's probably going to be pretty important, and she runs this whole joint, and I'm in love with her. Anyway, Helmeppo is now confirmed as a pest and as a part of Sword, and I don't think any of us were particularly surprised by this. Most of us assumed that he would be a part of Sword because Kobe's a part of Sword, and he and Kobe are each other's bitches. Ever since East Blue, they've always been together, they're inseparable, except for when Kobe is captured by Blackbeard and Helmeppo is understandably distraught. Honestly, Kobe and Helmeppo have this really underrated relationship. Underrated mostly because we don't see them in the story often, but seeing them start off as enemies at the very start of the story and then grow together, glow up together, and become best friends, which Tashigi confirms this chapter, has been really satisfying. And the fact that Oda is now setting up this final saga to bring them into the story, I think is really exciting. Like, I'm saying a lot of things in this chapter are really exciting, but that's because the chapter is really exciting. It's been kind of cool to see the core young Marine characters. I mean, like Smoker, Tashigi, Kobe, Helmeppo, etc. It's kind of cool to have seen them all advance in the ranks of the Marines as the story goes on, kind of comparable to the Straw Hats all advancing in their bounties. We also have this new character, Hibari, and I get the impression she's quite young. She's referring to 18-year-old Kobe as senpai. You don't need to be younger than someone for them to be your senpai, it's also kind of a rank thing. And she is lower in rank. She's a commander, so she's only one rank lower than Kobe, who's a captain like Tashigi, and she's one rank higher than Helmeppo, who's a lieutenant commander. So this is a pretty high rank, and she shouldn't be underestimated, I think. She also owes Kobe, so I'm sure we'll find out the details for that later on in the arc. We then have Prince Groose here, who's the rear admiral, outranking all the Marines seen in this chapter aside from Dol, and the apparent leader of Sword on this particular mission. He's definitely not the founder or the leader of Sword as a whole. Whoever is, though, is I think somebody who's higher ranked and somebody we already know. But he's just kind of taking charge of things in this corner of the sea. Plus we also have his Posei, these four around him who are most likely also Sword, but yet to be formally introduced. That being said, we have apparently seen them in a title page. Helmeppo and Hibari are desperately begging him to be able to go and rescue Kobe, but with his head and logic unclouded by all of these feelings and emotions that the other two are experiencing, he's able to basically say, no, that is a bad idea. We're gonna be swarmed by pirates, man. Nobody wants that. And yes, Hachinosu is Japanese for beehive, but it also refers to things that are full of holes, such as Swiss cheese. So if I had to guess based on this, I'd say that Hachinosu could be riddled with a complex cave system somewhere in there. Easy to get trapped in, full of thrills and spills. It's got that name for some reason, so it's either filled with some kind of hole or some kind of bee. We also have it confirmed that Sword are in an overall desperate situation, because atop Kobe being captured, they also haven't heard from that elusive dinosaur man. Last we saw of Drake was in the aftermath of Onigashima with Hawkins, who was busy bleeding out, where he was fairly injured, so it's unclear where he's wandered off to from here, but I expect we'll find this out within the arc. I'm actually really excited to have a core group of Marine characters who are going to be relevant in this arc. You know they're going to interact with the Straw Hats in some kind of way. And that's always fun. I'm sure Smoker's gonna be delighted. Anyway, Oda, what are you doing to me this chapter, man? He's like, I'm gonna get all these pretty girls, I'm gonna dump them in the one chapter, and you're gonna have to deal with it. So I'm dealing. Bonny seems to have been keeping a pretty low profile as of late, since Luffy, in a very pre-time skip moment, doesn't seem to know who she is. I say this because while Luffy was an uninformed menace in the first part of the series, just there to throw hands and throw parties, one of the developments he's undergone as a character is that he now reads the paper. We really saw this back in Onigashima when Drake approached Luffy and Luffy assured him that he knew who he was. It probably helps that Drake can turn into a dinosaur, because that's definitely something that would stick in Luffy's mind. But here he doesn't know who Bonny is. So while Bonny's certainly been up to things, she's been doing so away from public eye. Pretty impressive since she infiltrated the belly of the beast that is Marijois. At the same time, she seems to be really in the know as juxtaposed to Luffy himself. She's caught up on all the news that just came out of Onigashima. She remarks about how Jinbe's joined the crew. A lot of questions are also raised, like why did she come to Egghead alone? What happened to her between A, the Reverie, and B, this location? And what business does she have with the Vegapunk? Naturally, I assume the last one is something Kuma related, and on that note, what exactly was her relationship with him? I'm pretty sure they're both from Sorbet Kingdom and South Blue after all, that canonically being the kingdom that Kuma used to be the leader of, and being the kingdom that Bonny posed as dowager of when she infiltrated Reverie. And it feels as though in this arc we're gonna get some of those answers. Also, yes, I did just have to adjust my camera because it ran out of memory and I had to empty out the card. It was a whole thing. I also love how Bonny will just wring out her clothes in front of the guys like she doesn't care, and neither do they. And even though there's no restaurants in this island, I don't doubt that between her and Luffy, they're gonna find some food, and Luffy will realize that he's finally met his match. Upon this view of the island, we see it looks fairly tropical despite the wintry sea around it. I imagine this is Vegapunk's doing, seeing as Karakuri Island was a failed experiment when it came to turning a winter island warm, and this seems to have succeeded. Also, there's these caves here that Luffy etc. are currently in, and it seems to tunnel in deeper. I feel like these caves could be important. Maybe in the possible event that Hachinosu is riddled with caves, maybe they could connect. I hope that one of the next chapters is titled Adventure on an Island of the Future, because that's when you know shit's real. And as already stated, when it came to Sword and when it came to Bonny, I feel as though we're going to find out all kinds of things in this arc. Like, what was the deal with the Yeti Cool brothers over on Punk Hazard? We're probably going to find out about that. And even more topical as far as Punk Hazard goes, there's recent questions about that island surrounding King and Kaido. See, this is part of the reason that we didn't see Kaido's full backstory. There's stuff in his backstory that's going to be relevant to Vegapunk, that's going to be relevant to this arc. There's information in Kaido's backstory that Oda still wants to withhold from us, hence why we didn't see the full picture back in Wano. That being said, I want to keep this video more review, discussion, and analysis, rather than relying heavily on speculation and theorizing. And on that note, it's about time I talk about Vegapunk herself. So back with this Sunny Squad, this robot is much bigger than any of the robots Franky's ever built. It's able to basically cradle Sunny like a baby. And I don't think I've ever seen Franky this excited. Is this gonna be a kind of Franky arc? Or at least an arc in which Franky plays a crucial central role? This excites me so much because Franky is one of my favorite characters and he's so underrated. To be honest, I wasn't fully expecting an arc that might center around him, even with Vegapunk in mind, but he really deserves one and I'm really happy. And then we meet Vegapunk. This gives the me from over 10 years ago a huge amount of validation because pre-Punk Hazard, I theorized that Vegapunk actually might be a woman, as I tend to do with characters we don't properly see. And honestly, it was just one of those because I want it to happen theories than anything with any real substance. But I think my main point was that because Oda was withholding the appearance of this amazing scientist from us, then chances were that this scientist was gonna look completely different to what anyone would imagine, and therefore could be a woman. And then the series progressed and we were given two distinctly non-feminine silhouettes and people referring to the character as old man, and slowly and regretfully I let go of this wishful theory. It faded into the obscure facets of my mind, and I began thinking of Vegapunk as a man from that point forward. And then my camera ran out of batteries and I had to charge it. Comedy of errors here tonight. Anyway, here years later, when I've all but forgotten that old theory, we have this adorably gorgeous young woman. And I can honestly say that I've had no other choice but to simp.
Hard eyes, motherfucker.
However, the fact still stands that she looks nothing like the silhouettes we've seen in the past, and that people have still referred to Vegapunk as an old man, and she even apparently speaks like an old guy. Also keep in mind the 02 on her suit, implying that she, like the robot and the shark, could be some kind of creation, and also we have yet to receive a formal introductory box for her. And I do think that this genuinely is Vegapunk, by potentially giving us an old dude in the body of a young dudette. Oda has simultaneously fulfilled and subverted expectations all across the board, because that's what he do best. I have a couple of guesses as to what is going on here. Like, this young woman body could be a clone or some otherwise artificial kind of body into which Vegapunk's consciousness has been transferred, especially considering Vegapunk's original body could have been destroyed by the blast that Caesar caused back at Punk House at that time. Or perhaps no transfers have happened and Vegapunk has just had a little help here and there from Ivankov and from Bonny, who in this very chapter said she had business with Vegapunk, but that's almost definitely entirely Kuma related. In fact, I don't think it's this option at all, because given the genius that Vegapunk is said to be, this is going to be something entirely of her own doing. I will be referring to Vegapunk as a woman until we find out otherwise, and I really can't wait to discover more about her and about this whole island. Let me know what you guys think, and also if you could give me a bit of feedback on this whole video. I've taken a bit more of an analytical approach to this whole chapter review, aiming at pointing out details that some people may have missed, trying to remind people here and there of pre-existing plot points that are important and may be followed up. And I'm thinking about doing this from now on, but when I do get a major speculation for or theory for a chapter, then I'll do a separate video for that. I don't know, I feel like a lot of videos are very speculation and theory driven at the moment, and that's all well and good, but on focusing on what might be, I don't want to lose sight of what is, if that makes sense. I really want to find a balance between making these theory videos and speculation videos, which I do enjoy, and making the non-theory based character analyses, arc analyses, relationship analyses, and discussions that are simply driven by my love for the series. I'm wanting to do a lot with this channel between now and the end of the year, so if you can remember to click that subscribe button and ding the little notification bell to join the squad, that would make me as happy as seeing Doll's beautiful, beautiful face. What an angel. I'm Dawn of the World, and I will see you next time. Later, guys.